Hi there, I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to Pearls of Liberty, November 10th, 2012. And as Don said, that's almost 10, 11, 12. If you use the European dating system, it is. Well, the week is over, and I think I'm relieved that it is, although not necessarily terribly pleased with the result. And we did just want to go through a few election fallouts that we're calling Obamanation. And Don will comment on any of these. The layoffs. There have been a series of layoffs this week. The stock market has gone down a few hundred points on the Dow. There have been some resignations. One is General Petraeus is probably the most significant. And as Alex Jones has been beating the drum and telling everybody, Obama has said that the U.S. would participate in talks to put together a UN arms treaty. So, what a week!
Yeah, it's full speed ahead for tyranny, and if you're one of the people that likes Barack Obama, I apologize to you because we're not seeing things the same way. I don't really apologize. I just say, well, I don't quite understand you. I know there's a lot of people, probably not watchers of this video, that think that Obama's going to help bring in a new age, etc. I'm sorry, but what he's done so far doesn't support that view. It supports the view of an extremely adept con artist, somebody who is extremely good at getting you distracted over here and doing something over here that he actually said he would never do. And I personally know people who buy into these lies over and over again, and it's discouraging to see people like that. But I just have to say, okay, just let you go on your merry way, be happy as long as you can. There's two possible scenarios that could happen here. There could be a rabbit pulled out of the hat and we zoom into some period of prosperity, or we go right off the cliff, as most of the analysts I know are thinking is going to happen. I think it's going to be maybe a little bit of both, where things get really bad and then the government pulls the rabbit out of the hat and is able to stabilize things. The new economy that I see happening, and I'll remind Cindy to put a link up to this, could very well be an energy boom, because all of we have huge oil reserves that technology has now made it possible to tap that weren't technologically available before. And that if we had a free America, that energy source could be used to rebuild America. But the greening has actually been a clamping down so that we would have no development or limited development here, and that the jobs of the corporations producing them would go elsewhere like China. So this energy boom that may very well happen and lift us out of the depression, recession, could very well get America back on track, so to speak. But the plan of the globalists, and that may be in their plan, but they, in order to rebuild America, they want to put us all in Agenda 21 style cities and put high-speed rail between them, and the whole thing that if you saw the movie, the Hunger Games, if you saw Hunger Games, the picture about that the people that were in the movie that was a coal mining city, and it wouldn't be coal mining, it would be fracking and that kind of technology. So that's one possible future coming down the road. And it could very well happen within a few years, and then things would begin to turn around for the economy. I don't think that the globalists really want to abandon this country and let it go to seed, so to speak, because then you'd have people going back to farms and you'd have this natural life begin to develop again. That's what I want to have happen, and the cities that get abandoned and people go back to the land, that would be awesome. But I doubt if that's going to happen. Anyway, on the Petraeus thing, just wanted to throw in one little thought about that, and there's two possible scenarios. One is that he was asked to take the fall for Benghazi and he wouldn't, so he resigned. That's thinking about Petraeus as basically the good guy. I know that some sources think that he is. I'm not personally inclined that way myself. I don't have a whole lot of evidence one way or the other. Just not quite sure about the guy. But another possibility is that it's all meant to make his testimony before some Senate subcommittee that had to do with investigating what happened in Benghazi, to make his testimony less credible, to give him some plausible deniability, to make it so that there was no more chain of command that would be responsible, that could, if they shift things around, it can be hard to find the rats that scurry for their own separate little holes. That's the kind of a thing that I'm thinking. So that to me seems a little bit more likely. And we've got a lot of stuff coming down now, and things are going to go into high gear, and that is probably a good thing for waking up people. I know that I've been saying that for some time, that people will start waking up faster and faster. On the other hand, what it does is it further polarizes people and makes it hard to reach people that are Democrats or see Obama as the good guy. And I'm not sure how long that's going to continue, though, because more and more Obama and the administration are going to be seen as being tyrannical as they do more things openly. And some of the smoke screens, like the TSA is needed to keep you safe, are going to become more and more obvious frauds. And we shall see what happens. It's going to be an interesting 4 years, and even less than that, we should see some serious changes manifest.
The information about Petraeus and Benghazi, just to clarify a little bit, what the globalists have seemed to learn works with the American public is that they put everything right out there, but they craft the release of information so that some things are weighted more heavily than others. And while the emphasis should be on Benghazi and what actually happened there and the betrayal, now with Petraeus resigning, the emphasis, the focus is on Petraeus and his moral shortcomings, which might not even exist, or may be a whole lot worse than what they're releasing to the public. But that is really a moot point. The point is that they know how to use information, spin it, divert attention away from what's really going on, and, like a child having his picture taken, look at the camera. And they just know how to play us. And Don and I were talking earlier about that happening with Proposition 37. They did not talk about the issue, GMOs are dangerous. They completely sidestepped that and introduced a lot of spurious, really non-related, I won't even call them issues, such as cost and, labeling. Why do you label dog food and not a steak? There are reasons for that, and it is just a beginning. But what I'm trying to say is the focus gets shifted away from the main issue onto some side issue that really has little or no consequence. And the American people follow this. Oh, look over there, there's a hot air balloon. Instead of, oh my gosh, people are getting killed. People are getting abused. Our tax money's been being used to overthrow other countries' lawful leaders. And man, we just gotta get it together. We gotta learn how to determine what is important and separate out from the urgent from the important.
Right. I think that maybe those of us that can see through these things sometimes, I think, don't realize how many more people do see through them. I think there's actually an encouraging way to look at this election, even though I was never a Romney fan, and on paper they're really both the same in terms of their policies, what they would support. The truth is that Romney had to sell something different than what Obama sold. And what he was selling was traditional Americana and self-reliance, independence, even though his record is not that. But that's what he had to sell. And what we have is actually a divide between the electorate of those that want a return to grassroots, independent values, strong independent morality, and those that want a nanny state, so to speak. And of course that's a pejorative term, but hey, that's how I see it. So I think there really are a lot more people than we sometimes get credit for that do see through the distraction techniques. I think that I'm not a fan of Fox News. Used to be, but am no longer. But they highlighted the Benghazi story, and the truth got out there. They play the role of controlled opposition, and sometimes that's enough to get people thinking. But this divide is a divide on purpose. We have to keep that in mind. And a little bit later I'm going to share some ideas about how we can leave this divide behind us and not continue to stay locked in this battle that they actually want us to stay locked into, divided just like a civil war between the red and the blue states.
And there is still more fallout from Hurricane Sandy. There is a tent city, at least one, and we have the link. It's actually a Reuters link, and there are, I believe, about 800 people who are being housed there. They have to show their identification to use showers to go from one area to another. There is no form of entertainment there, no music, no TV. They're not, I don't think they're allowed to use their phones. So they don't, it was voluntary for them to go there. But you know, one thing that really, that triggered in my mind, if you have family members, get the kind of relationship with them that if something like Sandy were to happen, they live in another part of the country, that you could go and stay with them and maybe even start your life over again with their help. Depending on the government is a path to nowhere, and this tent city proves that. And you may weep when you read the Reuters article, because the one person who's staying there, again, went there voluntarily, but said that being there is like being in a prison. And it's institutional, you know. If we can move away from depending on institutions and live our lives based on relationships, we'll just be a whole lot better off.
FEMA camps will be voluntary at first. That is the typical strategy. There's always voluntary compliance at first until they get people herded in that direction, and then they make it mandatory. So that's really not surprising. That's an expected strategy.
More fallout from Sandy is that there's a vault at 55 Water Street that contains paper documentation for, I think, virtually all derivatives trades and many other, there are many other very significant paper documents there. And this vault, as most vaults, I mean, even your little fire safe that you have in your home, most of them are waterproof. But the story is that water got into this vault and documents were destroyed. So, who knows?
Yeah, I am very, very suspicious of that. That it was probably, they probably let that happen deliberately. I mean, they could have done something. This is what governments historically do when they want to wipe something out and bring in a new fraud. The Chicago fire, I don't know the year, but I think it was in the late 1800s or something. But that the whole thing that started Chicago Title, which is now the famous insurance title company, that was all set up after the Chicago fire, when all of the deeds were burned down that had been funneled into this title deed repository. They did that so that they could set up their new system based on certain fraudulent elements that I'm not able to give you at this time. I think it's all covered in the book about clouded title, but that I haven't gotten yet. That's supposed to be a really good source of information. But it all had to do with the corrupt Chicago politics, etc. So this is not surprising that there would be this loss of these documents. The elite controllers do not want any competition, and anybody with any amount of money that they can wipe out, that to keep them from coming up the ladder to challenge them, well, that's what they're going to do.
So beware. Hey, we've come to trust our government, and when somebody says oops, we all believe that it's really an oops. And it's time to begin to just question absolutely everything. And kind of related to that, John Rappaport wrote a very good blog about was Proposition 37 sabotaged? And there are literally millions of votes that as of Thursday had not yet been counted in California. Yet on Tuesday night they claimed that Proposition 37 was defeated. And there was 500 and some odd votes that Proposition 37 was ahead. So you do the math. With over 1 million votes not counted yet, it's entirely possible that Proposition 37 may not even have failed. But they called it, and nobody's asking questions now, nobody's challenging it. So there it is. Proposition 37 failed, whether it failed or not.
Yeah, you can bet that the people that are in the position to challenge it have either been paid off not to, or have been threatened or something, unless of course it does begin to take off. But the encouraging thing is that other states are beginning to follow suit. Too many people are seeing through the dangers of GMOs to not begin to take action. So the ball is moving forward, it's just meeting resistance, and we need to be wise as serpents and not accept defeat. We need to keep moving forward and require GMO labeling.
And this story actually broke a couple weeks ago on Alex Jones, but somehow we missed it. There is a British pedophile ring that has been linked to Parliament. And David Icke mentioned it this week on InfoWars. And Richard, I think it's Richard Belzer, the author, he also he followed David Icke on the show and even discussed a little more and stated that he believes that this leads all the way to the royal family. So here again is this blatant, proven, nightmarish, bad behavior from officials. Call them what you will, they're supposed to be public servants, but and will they even get a slap on the hand? Will anybody even notice?
Yeah, this is the fuel of this dark cabal, is pedophile rings, and it's extremely evil and corrupt. If one thing comes out, you can bet that there'll be many, many more that stay hidden, and sometimes they do have to expose when it gets to a certain level. But I believe that eventually the truth will be known, and I believe that the royal family will be exposed as well. So we just say, yes, Lord, bring on the truth. We need the truth. We don't want to be naive about these things anymore.
The blog Removing the Shackles alluded to Agenda 21 commercials on Blaze TV. Well, that's Glen Beck's channel. And having watched the commercials and in the context of his book, and there's even the same logo that he uses, although that may be the Agenda 21 logo, I'm not sure. But But I'm virtually certain that these commercials are a hoax. But even so, one wonders what kind of mind games even Glen Beck might be playing to, in the midst of criticizing Agenda 21, maybe plant these seeds that it's really a good thing, and somewhere down the line people will embrace it, even though ostensibly he's saying that it's bad. I'm never sure what to think anymore. People play so many mind games.
Yeah, there's a strategy that's used to introduce an idea and get people conditioned to it. So even if it's portrayed in a bad light, that they'll begin to accept it or regard it as inevitable. Things like the police state in movies like Blade Runner, stuff like that. It shows you a picture of the future that seems weird, but somehow there's a conditioning process that sets in where you think, well, that's the way things are going, because you can see it in incipient form, so your mind begins to accept it, even though you have a character that is a hero that fights against it. So it is always it seems to be mixed messages, but never forget that the guys that are behind the propaganda are masters at herding the sheeple, that they call us, the people that they think are their slaves and servants. So it's time to wise up and see through all that stuff.
And another truther channel, to some extent, True TV. I know there's a lot of wild stuff. I think it's just about, I think it's more of an ass kicker network than a truther network, but they do broadcast Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory show, and the first episode for the year of that aired this week, and following that was a very interesting pilot from Project Camelot, and it has to do with black operations and a mission to colonize Mars, maybe. We have the link, and you watch and decide what you think.
Yeah, I haven't watched that myself, so I don't know. And I found the articles by Daniel on the time travel and the time-space physics interesting. I haven't actually finished reading it, or even the portion that's been published so far. But I can't help but wonder if some of that isn't escapism to help us think that we have an out, that we don't really have to be here in this space and time, that some kind of a hole is going to open up and we're going to go through it. I don't want to start thinking along those lines. I want to face things in the here and now and deal with them the way that humans have for as long as humans have been around on this earth. So I don't want to become diverted.
And there certainly is some temptation to look for a way out at this point, particularly for many Christians who were hoping, anticipating maybe that Mitt Romney would win the election, and seeing in him kind of a savior who would change the path that we're on. So Don happened to read from some Christian prophetic men that there do seem to be a lot of Christians who are discouraged at this point.
Yeah, there's a guy that happens to be local, but just saw his blog today and saw actually a few articles, but they're all kind of along the same vein. A guy named Mario Murillo, who's in the Bay Area, and he's actually saying that a lot of people are telling him about these certain types of oppressions that they're experiencing, and it's all very real and all very concerning and serious, some of the symptoms, ranging from extreme discouragement to all kinds of bickering and arguing that never should happen, and different things along these lines. But I would be willing to say, as something that's not stated here, in Mario's articles that when you buy into a lesser of two evils scenario, you open yourself up to deception. And I think that's what happened with a lot of Christians who supported Mitt Romney. And as you know from watching these previous videos, we never did. We said we understand people that want to vote that way because they're really voting for traditional American values, even though that's not what Romney really stands for. So it was a deception, and I think it's better to have a defeat than to have a false victory. I think it's better to have people at least have to face the reality. So one of the interesting videos that I saw, and I'm not buying into this 100%, but I say that the guy has some really interesting thoughts about how to proceed. And this is a video called A New Beginning from a man named Bill Whittle. First time I've heard him or seen him. He's very articulate and very intelligent. Apparently he's a pilot and an entrepreneur and has a regular regular YouTube channel, regular broadcast, call-in chat kind of a thing. And he's proposing a number of ideas that I'll outline very briefly. He goes on for over an hour, I think an hour and a half, and I haven't completely fully listened to it, but I think I got the key ideas, and he does build on it, so we'll put the link in, and it's worth watching, at least I believe it is. And what he's saying is no more politics. Okay, let's just call the game right there, like we're out. And when by we I mean people that want a small government, low impact, not non-nanny state world, that we want Americana more or less the way it used to be, but with a new technology and without whatever prejudice and discrimination there might have been in the past. So what he's saying is that we want to build a parallel structure in the private world. And he's counting on enough prosperity to be available to be able to do that. But he's saying let's not rely on the government for anything, including schools. So it's the idea of homeschooling, but taken to a whole nother level with everything that we want to do. He likes the space program. He knows it's not going anywhere. So he uses that as an example, that we can have a group that can do space exploration privately and not depend on the government to do that. And that may not be your top goal, it's not my top goal, but he just uses that as an example. But some of the key ideas are that the big government that we have today really rose out of the Industrial Revolution and the need to regulate a lot of things to make the centralization of cities and a mechanized society possible. Well, in the day of now, we have a lot of decentralization. He used the example of an iPhone or an iPad being able to order anything from anywhere, and then it's delivered. So we have this pervasive technology that enables us to live a decentralized way. There's no need for big centralized government anymore. So, but because they've built this monolithic structure, their selves are perpetuating. They want it to continue, but it's going to collapse of its own weight because it becomes non-productive. But we need to not let the collapse find us unprepared, but we as people, like Cindy was saying earlier, that want to cooperate and form relationships and do things that benefit one another, we need to form these structures in the private side. So there's possibilities of groups beginning to do that, and I think that this is a really hopeful thing, that we should not try to win in politics anymore. Just consider that water over the dam that's lost. And this is kind of where Cindy and I have been at for a while anyway, because we've been out of the Democrat-Republican game. We've been looking at these alternatives, and the most recent of which that we mentioned last week was the Union States Project. That's still viable. I'm still looking at them and still looking good, and they're managing the bickering and they're keeping it to a minimum, and they're remaining focused, and that could even be a beginning or a way to begin to build structures like what I'm just describing that Bill Whittle was talking about, where you have voluntary private cooperation, because we're not talking about building a big government. We're just talking about, in that Union States project, just building the bare necessities to keep the UN troops from invading. So that's a very pragmatic thing. And these are all the ideas that are tying together. I'm rambling a little bit, and we're about to close, but I just want to say that it's not a time for you to be discouraged if you have your eyes open. If you were pinning your hopes on Romney, yeah, you're going to feel really in the dumps, and things are going to be very discouraging because you see your country flatlining, and that's very, can really take the wind out of your sails. But it doesn't have to be that way. Humans are extremely resourceful. Oh, here's the example that Bill Whittle used that I want to leave you with. Rosa Parks, who began the civil rights movement in the late 1950s by refusing to go to the back of the bus, and then that caught national attention and things really started to move forward from there. Well, quite interestingly, that event was not the first time she did that. She did that same thing on the same bus 14 years earlier, but nothing happened. Why did things change in the late 1950s when she did it? Whenever that was. Might have been early 60s. I think it was late 1950s, but whatever. The thing that was different was that people were prepared. People were ready. People were beginning to see the injustice and were rising up inside and dissatisfied with the existing structures. Well, that's what we've got now. So we've got ideas of that are a foundation, but they haven't quite taken off yet because we're just barely getting critical mass. We're about to get critical mass, and it's time to begin to move into some new structures and to prepare, because there's going to be a flood of people that are going to be like rats leaving a sinking ship when this big elephant of big government goes down. Again, that's not the only scenario that could happen, but it's a very possible scenario, and I think preparation is a wise thing to do. So that's all on that for now.
When you talk about the individual initiatives with the space program, all I can think about is the Billy Bob Thornton movie where he's got the rocket in his backyard. Try to overcome discouragement and move into a bright future. And thanks for watching us this week.
Good to be with you again, and as I've said before, see the world the way that it really is. See yourself in it. Walk your walk. You are the one you've been waiting for.